This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast about all things innovation in the people space. I'm Kyle Rode. Let's start the show. Welcome back, Rebel HR community. With us this week, I'm extremely excited to introduce you to Kasheef Wyzard. Kasheef is the National Director of Tech at dream.org, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation about a formula for talent that includes trust and focusing more on aptitude versus some of the things you would find on a traditional resume. So I can't wait to dig into this. Kasheef, welcome and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast here.
Absolutely, Kyle. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and a lot of times I wish I would have hit record before I do, and I can already tell that this is going to be a fun conversation, and that you've got an important context to share with the audience. But before we jump into that, I'm curious, can you give our audience a little bit of your personal background and what led you into this type of work?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'm originally born in Boston, Massachusetts, so I'll say that, right? I'm a first generation American born to parents of Caribbean descent. My dad is Jamaican and Bajan. My mom was born in Haiti. And I attribute the alignment of my career, my purpose to interventions, really, and exposure to educational resources far outside the community that raised me. So when I say that, meaning, born in inner city, an urban center that shares many challenges that many urban centers have, especially related to education and the lack thereof. Education and economic opportunity leads to crime, right? So tough area that I grew up in, but fortunately, my parents had the foresight to put me into a program where I was bused to school. And I started busing to school at the age of 7. I'm a child of the busing riots in Boston, which, when people think about Boston, I always hear, is Boston a racist city? It's definitely had its systemic challenges, and there are numbers to prove that. But being a part of a busing program enabled me to have access to educational resources that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So that dichotomy between the two worlds that I grew to know, seeing what I saw in my community daily, but then going to school an hour or so away, that led to, I would say, an unshakable commitment in me to be on the front line of change. Those experiences, realizing that, hey, why am I having a different experience than the kids in my neighborhood? Later on in life, it made me realize the fact that those experiences are experiences that, I could connect, or later on in life be a bridge, right? It positioned me to be a bridge, connecting community to opportunity. So fast forward, I worked in corporate for a while, traditional corporate sector. I worked in big tobacco. The work didn't necessarily align with me or who I was, but it did give me skill sets that are transferable. And later, and we might be able to dig into, specifics later, but later I was able to pivot into nonprofit and seize on an opportunity, a pain point, really, with diversity in tech, right? Companies needed help, and I had skill sets to help them with their pain points. And fast forward, a couple of doors opened, and here I am. So we can dive into details later, but it really all goes back to the beginning. Me having exposure that enabled me to dream. I had access to build on those dreams through a busing program, as I mentioned, choices made by my parents. I had space to fail forward as a Black man, space to learn, and then affirmation all along the way to believe in myself.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really powerful story. And I think that context that you come from and the background you come from is really important, especially for us to hear in human resources as we, as we sit in our roles and we think about, how do we help all of the problems that our organizations are facing. There's a DEIB challenge that many of us are being asked to rise to the occasion and help solve, not only in our organizations, but in society. There's a talent pipeline challenge where there's the quote, not enough people for the jobs available, or not the right skills, or, and how do we fix that? There's the, how do we retain people, and how do we keep talent engaged, and all these sorts of problems. And I would argue that your approach and some of the things that you do can give us some takeaways and some practical learnings that we can do within our organizations today to help with some of these issues. So I want to talk a little bit about what your focus has been as it relates to your formula for some of these talent issues.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I afforded the opportunity to partner with Fortune 500 companies and organizations alike through my role at dream.org. So I'll just say this real quick. Dream.org is an organization that dreams of a world beyond poverty, pollution, prisons, and polarization. Our mission is to close prison doors and open doors of opportunity. We have two key social justice issue areas, which are criminal justice reform and environmental justice. There is no justice, though, in these areas without economic justice, which, communities most challenged, communities most overlooked, a critical component to acquiring justice for those communities is through economic opportunity. So just wanted to say that. And in my role as the national director of our tech program, I've partnered with organizations like Target, for example, Target, Workday, the list goes on, but I'll just speak specifically to my partnerships there. And what they identified is a challenge in hiring diverse technical talent and also retaining that talent. And what myself, my team, what we honed as a solution is a cohort model in which we partner with these organizations. We reverse from their technical need, and then we create a curriculum to develop talent. So the company, for one part of the formula is an investment, prioritizing investing in talent. Talent, who is the talent? It's talent with lived experience, right? Talent that reflects the demographics that you serve, reflects the demographics that you sell product to, right? Your talent pool should align with the talent that you serve. That's talent with lived experience that then can help you generate better solutions at your organization. But because of educational gaps, the lack of educational access that challenged communities have, you got to take risks. You got to invest and take, I say risk, right? Slower risk, actually. But the risk is, hey, this is non-traditional talent, but this is talent with aptitude, right? So this is part of the formula, aptitude to learn. And how do you get a chance to understand their aptitude? It takes multiple touch points. There could be, digital engagement via an application, surveys, and so forth, where, you're getting a sense of who the person is. But then it takes follow-up, right? Traditionally, we rely on HR. What I've learned in my role is that HR departments rely on resumes, and they'll have an in-person interview. But again, many of the decisions are already made just based on what they see on paper, and they don't give that opportunity for talent to really give insight to their how, their why. So aptitude, their ability to learn. And we've done that also with being in a technical space. We even have talent take a technical assessment. So we actually learn where their technical acumen is, but by giving them follow-up interviews, which we have a 7-touch interview process. By giving them a follow-up interview, we get a chance to give them a chance to answer how, why, give us context to their answers. So aptitude to learn, then mindset. Along the way, throughout that entire process, we're getting a sense of their mindset. Is this person solution oriented? Does this person have a growth mindset, an insatiable curiosity to learn something new every day, get better every day? Grit, right? One thing that talent from challenged communities, talent of color, Black and brown folk have, one thing we got is grit, just by default. So, and that's why I said when I brought that word back when I said risk, because excuse my language, I want someone on my team that has that drive, that has that insatiable curiosity, that competitive fire, to push through, to achieve, to win, right? That's grit. So aptitude to learn, mindset, grit, those are critical attributes. And throughout your process of engaging talent, bringing talent in, retaining talent, you got to be really purposeful about building trust, right? Like trust is a word that doesn't get mentioned enough. And in every room I step into, I'm making sure I speak of trust, because in actuality, you're hiring talent because you trust them to be able to do the job. They haven't necessarily, you have a resume, you have some insights based on what they've shown you and what they said to you. But at the end of the day, you're making a decision based on trust. They're making a decision based on trust to work at your organization, to stay at your organization. So how do you cultivate trust purposefully on the front end, throughout, invest in them to retain that talent? So I'll pause there, but that's a lot of the formula that I've been able to leverage. And through that formula, not only have we had, nearly 200 people go through our in-person cohort program, and I say in-person, virtual format, but 80% of that talent has been placed through that training. So it's at a high placement rate, and we've actually upskilled even more talent beyond just that in-person cohort model. We have a scholarship fund as well, where we're empowering talent to upskill, pursue technical certifications, and pursue technical roles of their choosing.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things that it makes sense, but it doesn't mean that it's easy to do, right? And I think if you think about the model that so many of us have as it relates to, how we bring in talent, how do we retain talent, how do we train it? It doesn't fit this model, and I think when you were talking about the, how we make a decision, how we screen a resume or how we assess talent. So, we are taught that behavioral interviews are the way of the world, and that's the best way to do it. And I had this argument with an HR professional a few weeks ago that why are behavioral interviews good, right? Do they really work? Is past experience truly a good predictor of future performance? And the answer is, maybe.
Right.
But it's not black and white, right? And if somebody has a skill set and an aptitude and a natural tendency and motivation to do well in your job, but they just haven't done that job in the past, or they haven't flexed that skill set in the past, and you've never, you're missing out on potentially your best hire you've ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you so many stories of individuals where, I can't take credit here. The reality is we were just absolutely desperate to hire somebody.
Yeah.
And we took a chance on someone, and we're like, you know what? It's a terrible resume. The interview sucked, but we're going to give you a shot. And then, more often than not, they kill it. They come in and they're rocking and rolling, and they're listening, and they've got that grit that you described. And so I think our model is, it's faulty. And it doesn't work as well as everybody thinks it does. And so I'm curious as we talk about that question of kind of assessing the aptitude. How have you seen organizations adjust how they assess talent that works? Like what works as you think about it as opposed to the behavioral style? How do we actually assess talent based on aptitudes and kind of, mindset, ability to learn and all of those things?
Yeah. Well, I have seen organizations make adjustment, and I think just by default working in partnership with us because of the amount of time that we take, that we've taken in the past to, again, really assess talent and give talent a shot. We found those diamonds in the rough, for lack of better words, and I've seen organization become really intentional. When I tell you, go back, look under the hood, literally go back and analyze. So what's happened is we make recommendations based on our process, but ultimately we partner with these organizations to make that final, to have that final word, right? And investing and bringing in the talent. And through a process, building high trust with our partners, we've had some of our partners go back and really assess their interviewers, their rates in regards to how many that they've said yes to versus the talent that we've said yes to. Like we've had partners really do that deep analysis, I'd say. And what we've seen are positive changes. So like even for one, and again, and the talent pipelines that I support have been technical. So this is even higher barrier, a higher barrier for access, right? For non-traditional talent. So that said, what they've done is even critically analyzed the hardest component of their interview process, which there are two areas: the standardized tests, right? So I've even had some companies lower the value of the standardized coding assessments, for lack of better words, that they're assessing because they realize through partnership with us and through engagement with experts in their network that, there are, for lack of better words, biases, and this shouldn't hold the weight ultimately that it holds. Like we got to take the time to engage talent on the front end and on the back end to, again, get that context, get that how, get that why, get a sense of, their acumen, their mindset in other ways. So that's been one area of shift that I've seen. But then also, even had a partner basically shift the interview process to make it more practical in regards to what a day in the life is as a coder, for lack of better words. You're not coming up with these solutions on your own. You're actually working in teams. So how does this person, so in terms of the assessment, let's actually put them into scenarios that are more like those that they would experience on a day-to-day. And I've had a partner, shift their component of their assessment to actually create, pair coding scenarios where they're working with someone and, just essentially shifted their interview to align more like the work, the actual day-to-day work that this talent, that would be expected of this talent. And from there, we've seen positive changes. We've seen talent actually do better versus standardized coding assessments, which is, just a literal test, right? They're getting assessed more in line with the work that they would be expected to do in their day-to-day job. So I think shifts like that humanizes the process, right? And also the talent senses that. The talent senses a desire that the organization is really, really wants to understand their talents beyond what's on paper, and I think that just sets up a springboard to high trust.
We'll be back after a quick break.
And so used to having everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And this as being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's, what's really interesting there is, you're talking about organizations being willing to adjust a process, right? And being willing to admit like, hey, maybe this doesn't work as well as we think it does.
Yeah.
And I think that's, just being open to that. From my standpoint, I actually question, is an interview even necessary for some of the jobs that you're recruiting for, right? Is it really a good predictor of success? And for many technical jobs, it's not. An interview measures how good somebody communicates in the parameters of what you think good communication is. Like, that's what an interview is assessing, right? And I guarantee you there are HR professionals listening to this going, yeah, I've hired a couple doozies. Great interviews,
Yep.
fooled the system. They even took these assessments, and it's like 100% straight up and down, perfect match to the position profile, blah, blah. And then they get in and they're like, who is this person? This is a nightmare. What is And the reality is we have to be able to admit that and be willing to adjust. I'm curious. I know, dream.org does a lot, and I know that you're really focused on the dream.org, tech space. How do you, approach these organizations, and how do you get them bought in that hey, change might be necessary here. Here's the program that we have, and you should be a part of this. How do you approach that, and how do you really ultimately gain the buy-in? And the reason I'm asking is, I guarantee you that there are HR professionals listening to this right now going, this makes perfect sense. Yeah. I love everything about this. I want to do this, but I've got somebody in the organization that doesn't buy in. So I'm curious how you get these individuals that don't think change is necessary to buy in, and how do you kind of make that compelling vision for the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, there's one area where I can't shift an organization, which is just their commitment to diversifying their pipeline. So for one attribute, one thing that I look for is the fact that a company or a potential partner has already made that commitment. They already prioritize that, maybe even have DEI metrics, DEIB metrics associated to their bottom line, their scorecard, and so forth. So it starts there. We're aligned there that, hey, this is important. And with that starting point, then I take a needs-based approach and take the time to understand, your pain points, your technical needs. And with that understanding of those pain points and actually the literal skill sets, the roles that you need to fill, I'm then able to propose my solution, which is, hey, you know what? I have a team. We have a solution in which we have diverse educators that mirror the talent base that they would train, right? So there's that lived experience. There's that connection. We can build a curriculum and literally partner with you. So it's it's collaborative, so we lead the design, we'll create that 10 to 12-week curriculum, but you're stamping it, right? And you're engaged throughout to ensure that, the frameworks and all the above align with what the talent needs, meaning when this training is done, they're able to step into the work. So we can do that, but guess what? We could also go into the community and find the talent and then partner with you and ensure that as we are engaging in finding talent that, we think is a great fit, we're also going to we're going to be transparent and allow you to see, through our tracking mechanisms and in the way in which we do it, but we're going to allow you to see, right, the talent throughout that process. And I know that traditionally you doing this on your own, on average, costs around $20,000 to find a technical professional. I also know that there's anywhere from a multiplier of 4 to 9 times that to find a diverse technical professional. So now I'm tying it to I'm tying it to their bottom line. I'm speaking in a way that elevates the solution as value proposition. The value proposition of this solution, considering the cost it traditionally takes down to do this themselves. And then because of the way that we do this, because of the fact that, the talent will have a mentor that is from your organization for the duration of the training, the fact that they'll have lunch and learn. So it's not just technical, but there are foundational skill sets that they attain along the way. Your leaders can engage throughout that process. As a matter of fact, I want you to. That way we're building trust throughout the duration of this program. And guess what that all leads to? Not only talent, 80% of that talent being ready to step in day one, but a higher probability that you're retaining that talent because of the trust that you build. And that's the way in which I engage companies, with that solution. I will say, the economy in the last year has presented a challenge in companies taking that quote unquote risk. But we're also committed to doing a lot of research right now and honing these skill sets of highest demand in the new future of work. So the new future of work is not just tech, it's green tech. And green tech doesn't mean just, the skill sets needed behind a computer, but also some of the traits, some of the skill sets that are needed on the ground, i.e. construction and so forth, and transforming these communities. So, I say stay ready so you don't have to get ready. We're positioning ourselves to pivot to, the best solution forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's really important, for us as HR professionals to remember this. If you want to gain alignment and you want to, get people on board in your organizations, you have to be able to speak their language, right? And understand, the things that are compelling, to them. I think, if you're like in your organization, you're struggling and you're trying to figure out how do I solve this problem? So often if you go back to, okay, what is the actual problem I'm trying to solve? Trying to get talent, trying to keep talent, whatever that might be for your organization. And then you actually go out and do an honest assessment of what talent is available and what it's going to take. What's the investment in order to get that talent where you need it to be? Like, that's a totally different value proposition than, hey, I just can't find people. Exactly. Right. Or that, they that's the most worthless comment ever. We can't find anybody, or we're not having luck. Right. Like, well, luck is not a strategy. Like if there's not what you need out there, then you need to go figure out, okay, what is the market that I need to go tap into, and what are the resources that I need to tap into that market? And at the end of the day, here's what's cool about this, Kasheef. It's like, oh, by the way, this is also just the right thing to do. Right. But that's how you get business buy-in. And then, my assumption is that once it starts to work, it's like this snowball rolling downhill, and you've got organizations that are like, oh, we need to do more of this. Like, can you get me 20 more tech tech folks, for these open positions, because we'll take 200 if you can get aboard, right? Like I have a feeling that that's probably the case, and it becomes an issue where you can't service all of these partners.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Target Corporation, 60 people over the last 3 years, cohorts of 20. We were built into their annual budget. Again, a unique year that we're in right now, but
sure,
they get it, and they've made substantial commitments and investments in resources like ourselves, but also the talent. Once the talent gets there, so and that's critical to retaining talent. Especially I'm a millennial, and one thing I actually learned growing as I matured professionally, and this is kind of a theme, and this is probably part of the challenge too for talent acquisition and HR when it comes to retaining talent. That's why I keep going back to trust so much. You got to make those investments, because my generation, and I know at least myself, I was actually coached. I'm not going to say taught, but coached in a way that, hey, this isn't, the 90s and so forth. Like, in order to ascend, you gotta go get your promotion. Essentially 2 years and on to the next role. And that is, I would say, probably another dynamic, another challenge that companies are dealing with in terms of retaining talent. Because just I'd say a portion of the mindset that we have as a generation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, millennials, stick together, man. I'm with you. So, a couple millennials with sleeves. I think we're. All right, man. This has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate the context and the approach that you take, and I think that we could all learn a lot from this model. And I guarantee you that there are organizations within your local communities that are doing very similar things, but they are looking for partners to be open-minded. So I would encourage everybody to do a little bit of research in their organizations, do some research in their communities. We can help solve this challenge together. So with that being said, Kasheef, I want to switch gears into the Rebel HR Flash Round. I'm fascinated to hear these responses. Question number 1, where does HR need to rebel?
Where do HR needs to rebel in regards to, I'd say again, who, the talent, who they're selecting, who they're hiring. HR needs to rebel on the front end, take risk, and select talent again, more based on their aptitude to learn, mindset, and less just where they've gone to work or where what their work experience has been or where they've gone to school.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Maybe that's confirmation bias, but hey, I agree. Question number 2, who should we be listening to?
Yeah. Who, right? Lean experimentation and just a lean experimental mindset, right? Impact, value, scale. You don't build solutions without the vigor of engaging the stakeholders, constituents, or constituent engagement. So to answer your question of who is, I would say, both the community, right? The talent, the talent that you're seeking to engage and hire, but communities of color, right? So engage them, but then also your diverse talent that you have at your company, right? Because I think engagement on both ends, for one, can help you identify gaps, right? Help you identify gaps to close so that ultimately you can create higher level of trust with the community and the talent that you have, so that, again, you're able to retain and get some of those leaders of color, especially, to leadership positions.
Absolutely. And then last question here, how can our listeners reach out and connect with you?
Yes. Easy to access. Kasheef, first name Kasheef at dream.org. I'm on LinkedIn as myself, Kasheef Wyzard, Wyzard. And also Instagram, Kashwiz, Kashwyz.
Perfect. Love it. And we will have all that information in the show notes. Open up your podcast player, click in. Kasheef, sincerely appreciate the time today and sincerely appreciate the work that you're doing out there in the community and the world we live in, making it a better place, one person at a time. So thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
All right. That does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.